Hello, Spike Chartel here with another video exposing hypocrisy. You're welcome, by the way. Today, I'm going to be talking about how pseudo-liberals cook statistics to make their arguments valid. More specifically, to support measures that have been proven time and again to have little to no effect on the intended problem they are set out to address. I am, of course, talking about gun control and homicide rates. Let's get straight to a video that showed up on my Facebook timeline this morning and see what's buzzing in the world of manufactured violence.
Guns in America versus the rest of the world.
Guns in America versus the rest of the world. Well, if this were an honest look, it would actually be interesting and would point out that gun laws in the rest of the world have been mostly ineffective at actually lowering the homicide rates they are intended to address. But I already know that's not the case with this video.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the total number of guns.
Total number of guns? Well, I can already see where this is going because the last thing a pseudo-liberal wants to talk about are historic trends in homicide rates.
100 people per capita. So Japan has 0.6 guns per capita. So we'll just pull it up to represent that. The UK has 6.2 guns for every 100 people. Next up, Australia has more than double that with 15 guns per capita. Germany doubles that and has 30.3 guns. Switzerland's got 45.7 guns per 100 people. Then the US, 88.9 guns for every 100 people. So looking at that in another way, if this pile here is the total population of the world, then the US would be about 5% of that. And if this pile of ammo here represents the total amount of guns worldwide, the US has 35 to 50% of every gun in the world.
Yes, because the United States has the best game in town when it comes to personal liberty. Of course, I don't see what this has to do with homicide rates, which are the true measurement of how effective policies that are meant to address violence are. Of course, something tells me we aren't going to hear a damn thing about homicide rates at all from this guy, because for whatever reason, in the mind of a pseudo-liberal, being killed by a gun is worse than being stabbed to death.
So let's talk about what actually happens with these guns. After the Charleston shootings, President Obama came out and said this.
At some point, we as a country will have to reckon with the fact that this type of mass violence does not happen in other advanced countries.
So let's look into that. Let's look into mass shootings worldwide.
You know what? Yes. Let's take a look into that, why don't we? I think if you actually take an honest look into that, you'll see that Obama's statement was not only false, but only meant to invoke emotional response to motivate people to surrender liberty. Much like how the W used 9/11 to stir the emotions of the public to surrender liberty by not opposing the Patriot Act.
We're going to use the FBI's definition of a mass killing, which is 4 or more random deaths. Since 1997, Japan has had 0 mass shootings. Same with Australia, they've had none. The UK has had 1 event. Germany has had 3. Same with Switzerland, they've had 3 events as well. The United States has had 3 in 2014 alone. Since 1997, the United States has had 51 mass killings.
So a couple of things here. Number one, I'm wondering where the rates since 97 are. I mean, sure, the US has had more mass killings than the other countries on that list, but let's be honest here for a second. One US state, Texas, has more people than 2 of those countries on that list. If you're willing to ignore the fact that Australia has had 2 mass shootings since 97 because they don't fit the narrow definition given here, you have to still acknowledge the fact that none of these countries are anywhere near the size of the United States or has the US population. First off, let's take a look at the states. 51 mass shootings since 97 does sound like a lot. But when you consider the much larger population we have over all these other countries, I think you'll find the problem isn't as big as you think. Using the formula to calculate crime rates, which is number of crimes divided by number of people times 100,000, since 97 America has had 51 mass shootings. divide that by 325 million people, times 100,000, and you get a mass shooting rate of 0.015 per 100,000, since 97, of course. Now let's look at Germany. 3 mass killings since 97, with a population of 80.5 million. 3 killings divided by 80.5 million times 100,000 gives Germany a mass shooting rate of 0.0037 per 100,000, which isn't really all that much lower than the United States. In fact, it's pretty comparable. Now, what about merry old England? They've had 1 mass shooting since 1997, with a population of 64.1 million people. Divide 1 by 64 million times, and then times that by 100,000, and we get a mass shooting rate of 0.0015, which is also not all that much different than the US rate either. We're only talking about less than 0.1% difference. Now, I saved Switzerland for last among the countries listed that have had mass shootings by this guy's narrow definition, because out of all these countries, it has the loosest gun laws besides the United States, of course. According to this guy, they have had 3 mass shootings since 1997. Switzerland has a population of 8.1 million people, making it the least populated country on this list. 3 divided by 8.1 million, and then that answer multiplied by 100,000 equals 0.037 per 100,000, which is actually slightly over double that of the US rate, despite having stricter gun laws than the US and having less than half the rate of privately owned firearms. Now, to be fair, I do have to address Japan and Australia. With the strict definition of mass shootings in place, they haven't had any since 97, which means that they have the lowest mass shooting rates of anyone on this list. Of course, 2 successful stories out of 5 doesn't exactly look good for your argument either. Especially when you consider that Australia still has quite a good number of privately owned firearms. Of course, this completely ignores the fact that there have been other mass killings that don't involve firearms in Australia, and there have been mass murders in Japan as well. What this means is that Obama's statement was totally false in every sense of the word. This kind of violence not only happens in the rest of the world, but it happens pretty much at the same frequency as it does in the United States as well, despite all those wonderful gun laws that are supposed to keep the rest of the world safe. Could it be that those laws aren't actually meant to keep people safe, but to make them feel better instead? Could it be that politicians twist statistics and numbers and use emotional arguments to convince a populace to surrender liberty in the name of security, and that it isn't a uniquely American problem? Politicians wouldn't lie to us, would they? Surely you jest, Private Pile.
The next stat that we're going to look at is the total firearm homicides in these countries. We're going to use the statistic 1 out of every 10 million.
So now this ass clown is going to talk about statistics. Sad that he's going to talk about statistics that don't mean a damn thing, though, as less of something is going to mean less of that thing being used. I have another video explaining why gun death statistics don't mean jack shit, and if you click on the link that is going to pop up in the video when we cut back to this clown speaking again, you can check that out. There will also be a link in the description for my viewers watching on mobile phones that can't click on links in the video. Basically, though, he's going to make the argument that more guns in a country means more gun deaths. Of course, this is kind of a no-shit Sherlock statement. I mean, if I told you that more people die from volcanoes in Hawaii than they do in Michigan, like it was some kind of glorious revelation, you'd look at me like I either lost my mind or was completely retarded. Yet so many people will listen to this same kind of argument from gun control people and actually consider it not only a valid argument, but brilliant.
Japan's rate is 1 firearm homicide per 10 million people. The UK's rate is 6. Germany's rate is 7 out of 10 million. Australia's is 13. Switzerland has a rate of 26. In the US, 4. 401. Since 1997, there have been approximately 540,000 American deaths from firearms. That's more than World War I and World War II combined.
Yes, people get murdered. Do you want a cookie for pointing that out? What I find interesting, though, is that people like this focus so much on the number of people killed by firearms as opposed to overall homicide rates. If you watch the video linked in this one right now, you will see why that is an intellectually dishonest argument. Funny how he points out that Switzerland has more people murdered by firearms than all the other countries listed besides the US, yet doesn't bother to point out that out of all of these countries on the list, it has the second lowest overall homicide rate, at 0.6 per 100,000 versus Japan's 0.3 per 100,000, despite the fact that Switzerland has the second highest rate of privately owned firearms behind the United States. I am Spike Chartel, signing off now. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please hit the thumbs up button and share with all your friends. Feel free to check out some of my other videos, and if you like them, make sure to subscribe, as that's the easiest way to find out about the latest videos released by me. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.